You could call this car Mercedes' best-selling sedan globally, although the India story would be a bit different. You could also call it the OG baby of the Mercedes family. You could call it the great-grand successor, grand, a few extra of those, of the iconic W201. You could also call it the baby S-Class. Hello and welcome to ZigWheels' review of the brand spanking new Mercedes-Benz C-Class. And while I do have a couple of queries and questions about the S-Class tag, I can see why it's being called that. Baby S-Class, well, because it's quite obvious, isn't it? Although if you go for the AMG line, you get that different grille, which reminds me more of the E-Class. And that also fixes one issue that I have with this C-Class here, which is the avant-garde, and that's the bumper. It just looks a little bit meh. Although they are hard to spot, the AMG line also gets the super high-tech LED digital lights, which act as a safety aid and can do all kinds of funky stuff. But the S-Class connection actually goes underneath as well, because this is based on a revised version of the MRA2 platform. So the new platform has actually changed the stance of the C-Class just that little bit, because it is 65mm longer, it's 10mm wider, and the wheelbase has been stretched by 25mm, and that brings us some good news, which is a 21mm increase in rear seat legroom. Well, what do you know? If I didn't know better, I would say I was not sitting in a C-Class, because never before have I sat in one and thought, well, this is not claustrophobic or just cramped. This doesn't feel that way. Look at the amount of knee room on offer. This is set to my driving position, and you could actually have a 6-footer in the front and still have space to manage another 6-footer at the back, because you've also got a bit more headroom, but it's still not that much more. For a 6-footer, you also have more shoulder room, which just increases the sense of space on the inside. The beautifully sculpted seats can optionally be had in the sienna brown shade, which is derived from the S-Class. Is it perfect? No, you could do with better under-thigh support, and this is still not a backseat for 3, because, well, it's not wide enough for that, and you still have that strong transmission tunnel protruding out here in the middle. But aside from that, for S-Class touches, you do have these nice sun blinds for the windows, you have this armrest, and you have this nifty touch. Tap once and you get a mobile phone storage slot. Tap it once more, cup holders. Not bad. And let's not forget, a little bit more light coming in through that panoramic sunroof on this avant-garde. If you were expecting more S-Classness, well, move to the front. Oh my God! This is why they're calling it the baby S-Class, and this is where it really hits home, because this feels, forget about being better than the competition or better than its predecessor, this feels special, and that is incredible considering this isn't your E or your S, this is the C, right? Design of the dash is something we've seen on the S-Class. This trim, the wood trim that they've used here, is something we've seen in the S-Class. Slightly different here for the C in terms of the way the stripes are done, and along with that you've got these lovely spherical vents which were really compressed in the S-Class. Here they're bigger, but they still have that special feeling. Just listen to this. Can you hear that? Can you hear that? Just such positive clicks. A lot of that premiumness is also down to the fact that you have these beautiful displays here in the car. This 11.9-inch touchscreen, which is an option in other markets, is being offered as standard here on the avant-garde, and there are just lots of things that you can geek out over, like this touch switch for the sunroof. And it is actually quite intuitive, because you just tap and it'll stop. You want to go back, you just swipe backwards. You want to pop the sunroof open just for ventilation, you just need to tap it in and it'll do that. There's plenty of touch-sensitive controls everywhere. And then you come to your infotainment system here. It does some really cool things, like you can set your height, and according to the height, it will adjust your seating position. So I'm going to drop it down to my height, and watch what happens now. The steering wheel is being adjusted, the seat has been adjusted as per Mercedes what the right driving position could be, and at the same time you have this digital display for the driver which looks beautiful. So this C-Class in some ways does feel very S-Class-ish. But could it do better? Yes, it could. In terms of materials, you could do with better quality materials down here which still feel a little hard and scratchy, and you have these nice switches here for the powered seats up front, but just a little non-intuitive to use because there's no click to them. You just push against them and wait for stuff to happen. And aside from that, this tech-laden machine doesn't have 360-degree surround view for your car, and this is a precious car for you. And aside from that, you do not get ventilated seats. You could argue that you don't need them, but for a car that's going to cost more than 50 lakhs, you wouldn't be amiss in asking for them either. But this is a Mercedes, so when it comes to safety technology, it's pretty well equipped. It's got 7 airbags. It doesn't have ADAS, but it does have collision mitigation braking technology. It'll have the adaptive cruise control, all those features which will make your life on the road that much easier. And speaking of on the road, I think we have to test this baby S over there as well. Okay, let's go. Wait. The engine switched off and now we get going. Did you hear it come on? I could barely even feel it. If that's the kind of S-Class vibe you want to give, that's a good vibe to have.
This is thanks to the electrified tech-laden engines on offer.
At launch, Mercedes is going to offer the C-Class with 3 engines. There's the C300d in the AMG line, and in the Avantgarde line you get the C220 diesel, which for the first time is going to get mild hybrid tech. This 48-volt tech was already on offer with the C200 petrol, which is the one we are driving here. Now this is a 1.5-litre engine. It was there earlier with the C-Class as well, but this has been upgraded. The engine itself is delivering 204 PS of power, and the mild hybrid tech with the updates is now delivering 20 PS of power and 200 Newton meters of torque boost. Obviously the motor steps in when it needs to give that added dash of torque and power, which is typically at low speeds, to make it that much more effortless.
Driven calmly, the engine feels smooth and capable. Great for commuting.
What's also feeling pretty special straight away is the amount of quietness this cabin has, and I think that is inherent to making a good luxury car feel. It is great for every vehicle, but for a luxury car it's a must.
Clearly the C has the S-Class vibe, which brings me to...
If we spoke about comfort in the old C-Class, I'm sure we would have complained about the ride being a bit firm, and that doesn't really seem to be a problem here with the new C. It's feeling supple, it's feeling plush. It's feeling like a car that you could relax in and would enjoy taking it easy in as well. So my concern with this being called the baby S was, has it become too much of an S in the sense that, you know, comfort, luxury? This is the C-Class, the classical small sedan from Mercedes, and that smallness gives it a different joy when you're seated here. So, is it? Does it? The marks I'm going to give it here are for the chassis because it's feeling communicative. You know what is happening underneath. There's a sense of tautness to it, even though it is laid over with this suppleness to the suspension which is oriented towards comfort. But you can feel, and it feels connected because of that.
Yes, the steering could be quicker, and no, it doesn't get rear axle steering or adaptive suspension. In sport mode, the gearbox will hold on to a ratio for longer and the engine will be a bit more responsive.
Engine also is brisk. I wouldn't call it out and out exciting, but it is something that you could hustle along like this, but it would need a little bit more of a sense of connection, and that's to do with the throttle and the way the turbos are working.
Sadly, when you push the 9-speed gearbox, it feels laid back and robs the horses of their momentum, forcing you to use the pedals all the time.
And also to do with just how much power it has, and for that I do wonder what the C300d would be like with that added punch. So my queries have been answered. As an enthusiast, I'm looking at the C-Class and thinking that chassis really talks to me. It's something that will get me into the driver's seat more often. And as for the S-Class tag, it's not just a marketing gimmick. On the inside, this does feel expensive, and in the way it transports people, it will feel luxurious. But still, I am a bit conflicted, and the reason for that is, as an enthusiast, the chassis shows that it needs a stronger engine, and which is where I'm looking forward to driving the C300d. And as for the S-Class tag, for that I think materials could be a bit richer lower down on the dash, and in terms of the features list, it could be longer. Ventilated seats being right on top of my list. And that doesn't feel that much of a big deal as long as you don't think of the price tag, which is likely to be upwards of 55 lakh rupees for this baby Mercedes. But nonetheless, price tag aside, the C-Class certainly feels special.